Hi, welcome to the quiz. You can answer along on quizalto.com, all for free. The exact URL of this quiz will be in the notes down below. Let's get started. Good luck. What is the primary purpose of AWS Resource Access Manager? Automate resource deployment in multi-account environments. Enforce strict resource isolation between accounts. Improve resource performance through caching. Simplify resource sharing across AWS accounts. The primary purpose of AWS Resource Access Manager is to simplify resource sharing across AWS accounts by allowing resources to be shared with other accounts without the need for resource duplication. What is one of the key considerations to keep in mind when sharing AWS IAM policies through AWS Resource Access Manager? Encrypting IAM policies to prevent unauthorized access and tampering. Limiting the number of permissions that can be shared across accounts. Ensuring that policies are compatible and do not conflict with existing permissions. Automatically granting full administrative access to all shared resources. When sharing AWS IAM policies via AWS RAM, it is crucial to ensure that the policies are compatible and do not conflict with existing permissions, ensuring consistent access controls without the risk of unintended access to shared resources. What is a limitation of sharing AWS Secrets Manager secrets using AWS RAM? Recipient accounts cannot rotate the shared secrets. Shared secrets cannot be accessed programmatically. Limits on the number of secrets that can be shared. Shared secrets are not encrypted in transit. A limitation of sharing AWS Secrets Manager secrets using AWS Resource Access Manager is that recipient accounts cannot rotate the shared secrets, which may affect security and compliance requirements. What is a benefit of using AWS RAM over manual resource sharing methods? Increased network throughput. Automated resource provisioning. Enhanced data encryption. Centralized resource management. A benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager over manual resource sharing methods is centralized resource management, which simplifies the process of sharing resources across accounts. What is a limitation of sharing resources using AWS Resource Access Manager? Shared resources cannot be modified by the recipient account. Shared resources inherit the permissions of the recipient account. Only certain AWS services support resource sharing. Shared resources are replicated across all linked accounts. A limitation of sharing resources using AWS Resource Access Manager is that shared resources inherit the permissions of the recipient account, which may affect access control. What is a limitation of sharing AWS storage gateway volumes using AWS RAM? Recipient accounts cannot access data on the shared volumes. Shared volumes do not support encryption at rest. Shared volumes cannot exceed 1 terabyte in size. Limits on the number of volumes that can be shared. A limitation of sharing AWS storage gateway volumes using AWS Resource Access Manager is that there are limits on the number of volumes that can be shared, which may restrict the scalability of data sharing across accounts. In what scenario would sharing AWS CloudFormation stacks using AWS Resource Access Manager be beneficial? When configuration changes are required for existing resources within one account. When provisioning resources that only require temporary access permissions. When multiple accounts need to deploy the same infrastructure templates. When integrating third-party services that require access to the CloudFormation templates. Sharing AWS CloudFormation stacks via AWS RAM is beneficial when multiple accounts need to deploy the same infrastructure templates, ensuring consistency and reducing the effort required for deploying complex environments. What is a benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager? Move resources between AWS regions. Increase security by restricting access to resources. Automatically provision new resources. Share AWS resources across AWS accounts. A benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager is the ability to share AWS resources such as EC2 instances, EBS volumes, and snapshots across AWS accounts. Why would an enterprise use AWS Resource Access Manager to share AWS Transit Gateway attachments with multiple accounts? To encrypt traffic for enhanced security and compliance. To monitor network performance metrics for each account. To streamline cross-account network connectivity and routing. To automatically resize virtual private cloud resources based on usage patterns. Organizations may use AWS RAM to share AWS Transit Gateway attachments with multiple accounts to streamline cross-account network connectivity and routing, simplifying network management and enhancing collaboration across accounts. What is a use case for sharing AWS Systems Manager parameter store parameters using AWS RAM? Configuring custom IAM roles for ECS services. Deploying custom security groups for Amazon EC2 instances. Enforcing access control policies for Amazon S3 buckets. Managing configuration settings for Lambda functions. A use case for sharing AWS Systems Manager parameter store parameters using AWS Resource Access Manager is managing configuration settings for Lambda functions across multiple AWS accounts to ensure consistency and alignment of parameter values. What is a limitation of sharing AWS VPC peering connections using AWS RAM? Recipient account must approve the peering connection. Peering connections cannot be shared across account root users. Shared peering connections do not support inter-account traffic. Peering connections established via RAM have reduced encryption. A limitation of sharing AWS VPC peering connections using AWS Resource Access Manager is that the recipient account must approve the peering connection before it can be established, adding an extra step to the sharing process. What is the benefit of sharing AWS Transit Gateway attachments using AWS Resource Access Manager? Improve latency for DynamoDB requests. Reduce storage costs for EBS volumes. Simplify network connectivity between VPCs in different accounts. Automatically distribute incoming traffic to multiple EC2 instances. Sharing AWS Transit Gateway attachments using AWS Resource Access Manager can simplify network connectivity between VPCs in different accounts, allowing for easier management of network resources. What is the benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager for sharing AWS private link endpoints across accounts? Automatically executing intrusion detection systems for VPC endpoints. Accelerating network traffic between VPCs in different regions. Avoiding data exposure by securely accessing services within a VPC. Enabling simplified monitoring and logging for VPC traffic. By sharing AWS private link endpoints via AWS RAM, you can securely access services within a VPC across accounts, avoiding data exposure while maintaining compliance with access policies and improving data security. What is the main benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager to share resources across accounts? Increased data encryption and security measures. Enhanced network performance and latency optimization. Automated resource termination and cleanup. Simplified resource management and cost savings. AWS RAM simplifies resource sharing across accounts, reducing operational overhead and potentially saving costs by enabling efficient resource allocation. What is the benefit of sharing AWS application load balancers using AWS RAM? Improving network performance for EC2 instances. Enabling HTTPS encryption for S3 buckets. Lowering storage costs for load balancer logs. Centralized management of load balancer configurations. The benefit of sharing AWS application load balancers using AWS Resource Access Manager is centralized management of load balancer configurations, allowing for consistent settings and policies across multiple AWS accounts. What is the primary goal of AWS Resource Access Manager when it comes to sharing resources across AWS accounts? To allocate resources based on the predefined account hierarchy. To restrict resource access to only the account owner. To facilitate collaboration and resource utilization across organizational boundaries. To automatically terminate unused resources after a certain period. AWS RAM aims to facilitate collaboration and resource utilization across organizational boundaries by enabling secure sharing of resources across multiple AWS accounts, improving operational efficiency and reducing redundant resource provisioning. What is a use case for sharing AWS storage gateway volumes using AWS RAM? Enabling disaster recovery solutions across different regions. Customizing EBS volume encryption for EC2 instances. Managing data retention policies for S3 buckets. Installing custom SSL/TLS certificates on ELB instances. A use case for sharing AWS storage gateway volumes using AWS Resource Access Manager is enabling disaster recovery solutions across different regions by allowing multiple accounts to access and manage shared data volumes for business continuity. Why would an organization choose to share AWS security groups through AWS Resource Access Manager? To enforce consistent network access controls across multiple accounts. To optimize resource costs associated with security group usage. To increase network latency for improved performance in distributed environments. To automate resource tagging for all shared security groups. Organizations may opt to share AWS security groups via AWS RAM to enforce consistent network access controls across multiple accounts, ensuring uniform security measures and access policies across distributed environments. What is the primary purpose of granting resource access using AWS Resource Access Manager? To enable secure access and collaboration on shared resources across accounts. To provide full administrative control to all shared resources within an account. To streamline resource provisioning and deployment processes within an organization. To automate resource deletion after a specified period of inactivity. Granting resource access using AWS RAM enables secure access and collaboration on shared resources across AWS accounts, improving operational efficiency and facilitating cross-account resource utilization. What is the potential risk of not properly managing resource shares in AWS Resource Access Manager? Resource contention leading to performance bottlenecks. Increased network latency and communication issues. Incompatibility with AWS Lambda functions due to misconfiguration. Unintended exposure of sensitive data to unauthorized users. Failure to properly manage resource shares in AWS RAM could lead to unintended exposure of sensitive data to unauthorized users, compromising security and potentially violating compliance requirements. What is the benefit of using AWS Resource Access Manager for sharing encrypted Amazon EBS snapshots across accounts? Improving data compression techniques for encrypted snapshot backups. Accelerating data recovery speeds for encrypted EBS snapshots. Automating encryption key rotation for shared EBS volumes. Enabling secure collaboration on shared encrypted data volumes. Sharing encrypted Amazon EBS snapshots via AWS RAM facilitates secure collaboration on encrypted data volumes across AWS accounts, ensuring data confidentiality while enabling cross-account resource utilization. What is a benefit of sharing AWS Direct Connect virtual interfaces using AWS Resource Access Manager? Centralizing data encryption methods for all Direct Connect connections. Increasing network bandwidth for Direct Connect connections. Enabling multiple accounts to connect to the same Direct Connect gateway. Automating failover mechanisms for Direct Connect virtual interfaces. Sharing AWS Direct Connect virtual interfaces via AWS RAM allows multiple accounts to connect to the same Direct Connect gateway, streamlining network connectivity and enhancing collaboration between accounts. When sharing resources using AWS Resource Access Manager, how are resource permissions enforced? Through Amazon CloudWatch alarms and monitoring. Through AWS identity and access management policies. Through network firewalls and encryption protocols. Through custom resource sharing scripts. Resource permissions when sharing through AWS RAM are enforced through IAM policies, ensuring that only authorized users have the specified level of access to the shared resources. What are the permission levels that can be assigned when sharing resources through AWS Resource Access Manager? Partial control, unlimited, superuser. View only, edit, admin. Read only, write, full control. Read, write, execute. When sharing resources through AWS RAM, you can assign permissions at 3 levels: read-only, write, and full control, allowing granular control over resource access. What is the advantage of using AWS Resource Access Manager to share Amazon RDS database snapshots across accounts? Enabling data recovery and backup collaboration on shared database instances. Automating scheduled snapshot creation for RDS databases. Accelerating database query speeds for RDS snapshots. Improving data compression techniques for shared snapshot backups. Sharing Amazon RDS database snapshots via AWS RAM facilitates collaboration on backup and recovery processes for shared database instances, enabling secure data recovery and ensuring data availability across accounts. And that's a wrap. Thanks to everyone who participated. Remember, you can answer along on quizalto.com, where you can keep track of your progress and find much more quizzes. We hope you had a fun and challenging time. Until next time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as we upload. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts or suggestions, and if you think this video is worth sharing with someone who could benefit from it, please forward a link to them. See you next time. Thanks for watching.